Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum, and today we are taking a look at a brand new DK Productions Semiauto Sturmgewehr, Semiauto MP-44, aka a BD-44. Now, to give you a little background on this, this is the brainchild of a guy named Bernd Dittrich, who in Germany runs a company called Sport System Dittrich. He founded that company in 2003, making reproduction German World War II firearms, has been doing so ever since, so he's got more than 20 years experience doing it now. I actually had the chance to visit when I went to the IWA show earlier this year, and I did a video tour of his factory, which was pretty awesome, and I'll link to that video in the description text below if you haven't seen it, so you can see where a lot of the bits of this gun came from. Now, the guns that he makes in Germany are not legal for importation into the US. They violate the assault weapons ban because they have things like detachable magazine and a pistol grip. However, as with all of the major gun companies that sell this sort of style of firearm in the US, it's perfectly legal to manufacture here. So what they have done is set up a US partner company, I guess you'd call it, which is DK Production Group. The D is for Dittrich, the K is for the American owner. And those guys bring in German parts, manufacture the receivers here in the US, so that it's legally a US-made gun, but it gets us the fantastic high-quality reproduction of the Sturmgewehr that Dittrich has been making in Germany for 20 years now. Okay, before we go further, I know people are going to bring up the other major semi-auto Sturmgewehr project that has been ongoing for many years. That is the one that was started by Hill & Mack, and it was then purchased not that long ago. It was taken over by PSA. I was aware of that project from its inception. We did some video on it back when it was the new hot thing in like 2016. However, the dichotomy between that gun and this gun is twofold. One, the PSA, Hill & Mack, now PSA gun, is intended to be a substantially lower price point. This thing is $6,200, very expensive. It is cheaper than PTRs go for now, though, so there's a plus there. The Hill & Mack gun's supposed to be cheaper. However, that Hill & Mack / PSA gun was also never designed to be as good of a reproduction or a replica as this one. It was specifically developed to use Stanag pattern magazines so that they could make versions of it that would shoot cartridges like 5.56 and 7.62x39, which would make it a lot more accessible. This is chambered for the original 8x33 Kurz cartridge that the Sturmgewehr used. It uses both original STG magazines as well as DK makes, of course, its own reproduction magazines that fit, but they're interchangeable magazines. So if you're not willing to source yourself, almost certainly PPU, new production 8x33 Kurz, this is not the gun for you. Next thing to touch on, if you go to DK Productions' website, you will see all sorts of cool German World War II stuff that they make. Those are guns that SSD, Sport System Dittrich, makes in Germany, and I believe right now only 2 of those are actually available in the US. They're the BD-44, which is their semi-auto version of the MP-38, which I have a previous video on, and it's pretty freaking cool. It's a really good reproduction and a really nice shooting gun. And then there's this, the BD-44. In theory, they are also going to release a copy of the MP-43/1, which is the slightly earlier pattern than this, as well as a semi-auto version of the MKB-42H, which would be super cool. That was the very first open bolt iteration of the Sturmgewehr. Of course, for the US market, they're going to have to make that a closed bolt firing gun. We'll see how they do that. And I don't know what the schedule is, what the timetable is for bringing in the different patterns. But what we have now is a copy, a reproduction of the standard major production MP-44, and that's the standby of MP-44. So I'm really curious to see how this handles. I haven't taken it out to shoot it yet. We're going to do that after we finish disassembling it here on the table today. So let's dive in, let's take a closer look, and let's take it apart and see what the internals look like. So right off the bat here, the gun looks gorgeous. The finish looks really nice. The wood is nicely made, but I'm not a huge fan of this. The magazine stops don't quite actually match the stamping on the magazine well. So I got 2 magazines with the gun. They both fit the exact same way. So they lock in nice and solid. There is just the tiniest bit of play back and forth here. We will see if this has any impact on the reliability or if it's just kind of a non-issue. I don't know. I did look through some original pictures. I can see a few original pictures that show a little bit of a discrepancy like that on wartime guns, but not a lot. I don't think that's supposed to be that way. It doesn't look great, but let's continue. So let's pop the magazine out here. This is one of their reproduction magazines. It is stamped MP-44 down there. It doesn't have any of the Waffenamps that you would get on an original production German magazine, but the rest of it looks really good. Like, this is an excellent reproduction. At least it looks like an excellent one. We'll see if it actually functions. Now, when I got this, I talked to Tor Christofferson, who's the K in DK Productions, about changes that had been made with these rifles from back when the PTR-44s were imported. Those PTR-44s, by the way, were made by Dittrich in Germany and then imported. I don't know the exact details of how they got them imported, but those guns had some problems with breakage and some problems with reliability. Now, Tor tells me that they have made a couple of changes. Of course, it's been a solid 10 years since those guns came in, so they've improved some of the parts design, and they are now doing all of their finishing and their heat treating in-house, which is pretty impressive. The other thing that I noticed here is looking at a couple of these parts, the gas block here, the stacking rod gas plug, and the front sight tower have this distinctive sort of rough exterior finish to them, because these are actually apparently forged parts just like the originals were. This is what you would expect to see on an original German Sturmgewehr. They forged these pieces and then didn't bother to finish machine the external surfaces, because it didn't matter. It was purely aesthetic. And by the time they were making these, they needed as many guns as they could get. This, it would be really easy. In fact, it would be a lot easier for a company to actually make these as CNC machined parts. They'd have this beautiful, perfect finish on them. And that wouldn't actually be quite right. So honestly, I'm really impressed to see actual forged and unfinished, sort of unfinished, not surface machined parts out here. That's really cool. We also have the short thread protector, the short threading on the muzzle out here. This is correct for the MP-44. The MP-43/1 had a longer one to fit some different muzzle devices. And then there were very late war guns that had just smooth barrel threads without, well, smooth muzzle without any barrel threads. So it's like Dittrich's MP-38. He got the fine details on some of the small elements like this correct. The dust cover here snaps closed nicely and then pops open when the bolt cycles. That's good. We have got a rear sight there, graduated out to 800. Some of the early production Sturmgewehrs did have setups for optics, either a ZF-41 optic mounted here on the rear sight tower. There would be a specific set of extra pressing ribs in there to mount a ZF-41, or a full-on rail like you'd have on a G43 here on the side of the receiver for a ZF-4 optic. None of those were functional in practice in the field, and they were dropped pretty quickly. I'm sure they're going to be available from DK somehow, but I don't know the details, and this rifle doesn't have either of them. I like the look of the pressings here. The MP-44 marking there is spot on. That's exactly how the original stampings look. That's cool. The serial number here is stamped just like the originals, hand individual letter stampings. We have our safety switch here. Now, the original Sturmgewehrs had a split safety selector, so you had a safety that would go from safe to fire, which they've reproduced here, and then they had a push-button selector switch that was semi-auto on one side and full auto on the other. What DK and SSD have done here is they have recreated that selector switch, but it's a solid piece of the trigger assembly stampings. So it doesn't move, it's not a button at all. And it's set permanently in the single position, although I see they did not actually mark it. Oh, they did mark it, but it's really faint there. There is a really faint E for Einzelfeuer, or single shot there. We've got the original trap in the butt plate, spring-loaded there. You could put a cleaning kit in there, and then the corner reinforcements on the stock. That all looks appropriate and good. And the charging handle is a little, it's not gritty, but it's kind of, honestly, it feels kind of lumpy. It also feels quite stiff, which I like. The issues with the PTR were largely focused on not having enough return pressure on the mainspring, so perhaps that's been solved here. We'll see when we go out to the range. Let's go ahead and take it apart. We've got our one cross pin on the back. This is a first, guys. I haven't opened this up before right now. It came in and we put it right on the camera. So pins out now. Oh, that is a stiff buttstock fitment. So buttstock, the recoil spring fits nice and smooth in there. Again, one of the early complaints about, well, MKB-42Hs is that that hole wasn't wide enough, and when it got humid, it would swell and trap the recoil spring, and the gun would stop working. The fire control group pivots down. It does not come off. It's permanently attached with a rivet here. So that comes down. We've got our semi-auto fire control system in there. It's a hammer. So was the original. That's kind of cool. We've got this here. The original Sturmgewehrs, of course, had auto sears in them because they were selective fire, and that would prevent the hammer from dropping before the bolt was all the way forward, which is an important element in safely running full auto. It looks like DK has put in the same functionality, but not as an auto sear, just as an out of battery safety, which is really nice. That's one of those things, like the auto sear is both in a machine gun, it is both a feature to allow full auto fire, but it's also a relevant and important safety device so that you don't ever get hammer follow, you don't get the bolt firing, the gun firing out of battery. And they have recreated that here just without the auto functionality. So if I don't press this down, the trigger won't move. When the bolt goes forward, it's going to push that down, which allows the trigger to go. If I pull it the rest of the way, it's going to drop the hammer on my thumb, my finger. All right, now we can pull out the bolt and bolt carrier. There's our bolt carrier. And there is the bolt firing pin. It's not a spring-loaded firing pin, which the originals weren't either. This is all nicely goopy and oiled there. Like I said, this is the first time I have taken this apart. All right, so classic tilting bolt. That's the bolt locked in battery. That's your locking surface, which locks into, we can't really see it from the inside here, but it's going to lock into a shoulder right down here, like right behind that divot in the milled trunnion inside this sheet metal receiver shell. So there's that. The recoil spring nests on the back end of the bolt carrier like that. This looks good. Let's head out to the range and see if it shoots as nicely as it presents. All right, back out on the range. Now, this is our second attempt here. The first gun had a number of malfunctions. I sent it back to DK Productions. They replaced it with this gun, which just came in yesterday, and so we're going to go ahead and do some shooting with it. One thing I will point out, first off, I'm using PPU ammunition. I've loaded these mags to 24 rounds. DK recommended no more than 25. And one thing that I noted on the first gun, that the mag stops and the mag well don't quite line up, well, that's the same on this gun. So the first challenge is when I rack it, will it chamber around? You ready? Nope. All right. So that's exactly what it was doing on the previous gun. I have 3 different mags here. Let's try all 3 of them. That one worked. That one just didn't fire for some reason. Yeah, basically no firing pin indent on that guy.
your tools yet.
Yeah. All right, I will tell you, if we ignore the couple of malfunctions, the gun is absolutely beautiful to shoot, which is true of original Sturmgewehrs as well. The thing is like an 11-pound gun firing a pretty medium-sized little 8x33 cartridge. It does not have very much felt recoil, and what recoil it does have is far more of a gentle push than any sort of snappy kick. They're fantastic guns to shoot. I wish it were a little bit more reliable. Well, that one went all the way. Went into battery. All right. Looks like our issues have been pretty much resolved with the exception of the one magazine. I'll give them one bad mag. A few intermittent malfunctions, well, one specifically over the two over the course of shooting. If you want a reproduction Sturmgewehr, this is definitely the best option out there. Obviously, there was also what was originally the Hill and Mack Sturmgewehr, which then turned into the PSA Sturmgewehr when PSA bought that project, and that gun has been, I think they said, put on the back burner, but I'm pretty sure that means it's never going anywhere. And frankly, that gun was never going to be a particularly perfect replica because it was designed to use STANAG magazines and available in like 5.56 or 7.62x39 or 300 blackout or 8x33. If you want a proper reproduction that uses original as well as reproduction copies of the original magazines, DK Productions is the option here in the US. These are expensive guns, but they're actually a little less pricey than the BD-44s that we have on the market from when, well, they were made by they're essentially the same gun made, oh boy, 15 years ago now and imported by PTR. These now are made in the US, legally speaking, made in the US. They have the handling, the feel, fantastic reproductions of the Sturmgewehr with some issues of reliability, which, I mean, I guess if I want to be fair to DK Productions, the originals have some issues with reliability too. Quality control was a nightmare on original Sturmgewehrs, so maybe we shouldn't expect reproductions, accurate reproductions, to be any different. All right, there you go, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching.